What's up, YouTube? In tonight's live stream, we're going to be creating this sort of interaction where when we hover over a card, it pixelates the image and it gets progressively more clear. So let's try and build this out. I'm getting everything set up for our stream. I'll be watching the comments for any questions. And all right, let's get going. So I'm going to try using this library called Pixelate.js. So they have this demo on how to set it up, but basically we can choose the level of pixelization that we want within our images, and it can get progressively more clear or pixelate it depending on what we're looking for here. So the one thing about it is this library doesn't have a CDN link. We do need some way to get the script for it. So I'm just going to inspect here and I'll open up the body, and I found the script for it right here. So I'll just open up that script file. So here's all the code they're using for this pixelization library. So thankfully it's not a ton of code, so we can just bring that over into Webflow, and we'll add it to the before closing body tag right here. So I'll go ahead and throw in all that script. And so there we go, we have the library. Now we're going to be using GSAP for our animation. So I'm going to go to gsap.install and we'll copy the main GSAP core library. So we can go back into Webflow and paste that in. And I'm going to be writing the code for this in Code Sandbox so we can see real-time updates. So I'll head to codesandbox.io and create a project, a static template here, and we'll go ahead and create a new file icon right here. We'll call this script.js, and so we have our script file here. We can copy our URL right here to our Code Sandbox file and head back to Webflow. So we just want to link up that Code Sandbox file like so. So we'll add our URL right here inside the source, and we'll look for the script.js file right there. And yeah, so that should be everything we need from that point. So we have a couple list items there, and inside the list items, we have an image here. That's just absolute, 100% width. And then the parent, we're setting top padding on it, so that's looking good. So let's go ahead and publish this, and I'm going to refresh here. So all our code's gone. We just need to start writing this out. So if we look at the docs for this, the first thing it wants us to do is grab an image and then pass it in to this pixelate and then choose the amount of pixelization that we want for it. In our case, we're not just going to have one image though. We are going to have quite a few images. So let me real quick, let's toggle off the preview. Let's collapse this, just trying to get more focus here. So I'm going to use a jQuery each loop. That way we can write the code once and it'll apply to every image inside our cards. So we can just loop through each of these sort of link items we have right here. List items, we have each of those, so I'll just copy the class of that, and we'll loop through each list item, and we want to find the image inside of this item. So we'll say let image equal this, which refers to the list item we're looping through, and dot find, and we're going to find this photo with this class inside of that. And I'm going to put straight bracket zeros just to make sure if there was multiple of these images, we're getting the first one that we find inside here. So once we have that sort of image selected, we can go ahead and pass it into the pixelate. So we're looping through each item, finding the image inside the item, and then pixelating it. So let's go ahead and save that, and let's just refresh and see what happens. So what you'll notice is there's actually a pixelated image underneath each of our default images. And that may seem a little bit strange, but if we inspect, we'll see what's happening. So it's creating a canvas element. That's how it creates the pixelization, and it's creating it directly under our image element here. So we're going to want to position this canvas absolute on top of our regular image. That way it's covering up that regular image. So if we head back to Webflow, let's just drop in an embed, and let's open up some style tags. And we're going to target only canvas elements that are inside of our list items. We'll find the canvases that are inside them, and we will position those canvases absolute to the top of the parent, left of its parent, and let's also give it a z-index of 2 just to make sure it's on top of our image. And because that canvas is being added underneath this image, it's inside of this height div, which is set to position relative. So that's fine. We're just absoluting the canvas to the height div like so. So let's go ahead and publish that. Hi, Duncan. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the stream. Okay, so we have it published. Let's refresh. So now we have our absolute canvas on top of our image, which is looking great. Problem is, if we resize, you'll notice the background images are resizing, but the canvases are not. So with JavaScript, it creates a canvas at a set size, and that size doesn't change. So if we go back to the docs here, there's this window on resize function they say to add, where it just updates the size of the canvas every time we resize our browser, which is what we're going to want to do. So we'll just throw that in there, and we're saying whenever we resize the browser, we're grabbing the Pixelate that we just created up here, and it's getting the width of the parent of this image. So that's our height div, and it's using that to update the size of the canvas. I'm also going to change this from var to let just because it's best practice. So let's save that, and let's refresh and see what happens. So now when we resize, we should notice it updating. I think only this last one's updating though. And I've had this issue before with that particular type of resize event. So I actually have my own resize events in the trick site. Yeah, so this window add event listener resize, if we come back to our code, so they're using on resize, and I think you can only have one of those per page. So if I just remove what they have, replace it with my version, I think that should work for every one of our images. Let's just double check and make sure. So yeah, now all of our images are resizing, or all of the canvases are resizing, and yeah, that's looking good. So we have that set, we have it resizing, we have it on top of our images. We can choose pixelation amount. So if I come back to the code and I set initial amount to something like 90% and we refresh, that should be a lot more extreme. Let's really make it extreme, 97%. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, cool. So it's super pixelated there. So if we go back to the library here, we can at any point decide to update the pixelization on the canvas. So on page load, I could set it to not pixelated at all. So 0 pixelization. If we refresh, that looks fine. And then maybe through some kind of interaction, we update the pixelization to like 50% on this canvas. So I think that's going to be our goal. We're going to want to animate pixelization though, not just set it to one sort of amount. So I'm going to create a variable called, I'll call this pixel. And we will create an object in here, and we'll say amount, or we'll say value. And that value can just be 0. So basically, I'm just creating an object here where we can store what we want the current pixelization amount to be at. And this is where we get to use GSAP. So we've already linked up GSAP right here in the project above our code sandbox. So if I come back to the code here, we can create a timeline. I'll say let TL equal gsap.timeline. And we'll set the timeline to paused by default, so it's not actually playing yet. And then what we could do is take, we'll do a TL.to, and just like we can animate anything, we could animate this object here, and we could animate its value to whatever we want, say 90%. So it animates from 0, or it could animate from 20% to 90%, but we'll just leave it starting at 0 and it will animate the value to 90%. So all that's doing is updating the value stored inside this object. It's not really doing anything with this pixelization yet. So to connect the two, what we can do is in GSAP, we can do an on update. So this will run while our GSAP animation is running. And on update, we are going to set pixelization. And we want to set it to whatever the current value is inside this pixel object we created here. So it would be pixel.value. So we're basically creating a GSAP animation where we animate this object from its value of 0 to value of 90%. And while that animation is updating, we're updating this pixelization here to be whatever the value of this object currently is. I'm going to comment out the pause true for a minute just so we can see it animate from 0 to 90% on page load. And let's refresh and let's just see what that does. So you should have noticed like all of them just animate it like that. And the great thing about this is we can do all the good stuff we have access to in GSAP, we have access to. So we can do a power to out ease. We could change the duration to something longer. And if we save and refresh that, so let's see, there we go. Yeah, so it's doing one at a time. And I think the reason for that is, I was going to say because I created this pixelization amount inside of the loop. So I think this is fine though, because we're going to have them all paused by default, and then we want to play this whenever we interact. So if I come back over here and we go to maybe a jQuery event, and we'll do on hover. So copy this over. So I'm just going to say the timeline's paused by default, and we'll say on hover of this, which refers to the list item. So whenever we mouse enter that list item, we want to grab our timeline and we want to restart it. So it just plays every time we hover into this link. And then when we hover out, so we mouse leave, say we hover out before the animation was finished, we just want to set our timeline progress to complete. So we'll force it to go all the way to the end if we hover out before the animation's finished. So that should be good there, and I'm probably going to speed up the duration a little bit. And let's just see what we're looking like. So we hover in, it pixelates, and we hover out and it goes back. So I think I actually have this backwards. I want it to start at a value of 0.9 and animate to a value of 0 so it gets clear. So let's save, refresh. So hover in. Yeah, it's so it's going from a really pixelated value to a clear value. But the smaller values like 0.1, like these values, the last 50% almost feel like nothing anyway. There's not a huge difference between them. It's really everything above 50 where we see that difference. So we're probably going to do something a little more intentionally choppy, I guess. So what we would do is .sets, and this won't have any duration, won't have any ease. What we can do is just set pixelization amounts. So I could set it by default to something like 97%, and then we'll do another set. So sets are just instant, there's no duration. We'll set the pixelization amount to 90%, and then we'll go ahead and set the pixelization amount to 86%, and we'll set it to 0%. So it just snaps from this value to this, to this, to this. And these are all happening right after each other with no pause between them. But we can fix that by just setting defaults, set a default delay between each of our steps of, let's say, 0.15 seconds. So we could have just added the delay here for each of them, but since they're all pretty much going to have the same delay, we can just plug this in defaults. There we go. So the first one, we won't want it to have any delay. It's going to be instant, and each of these will wait this amount of time before they change. So that should be good. And then one other thing we could do is add an ease to our entire timeline. And that's going to be a little bit different. I'll do a power to in. So what this does is it eases all of these points. So these first ones are going to switch a little bit slower, and then these towards the end will speed up. They'll switch a little bit faster because we're easing the entire timeline, and we're starting with it slow and speeding up towards the end. So let's save it and refresh. So there, it like quickly snaps between a couple frames that we defined. Instead of sliding the pixelization down, we've defined a couple steps we want it to do, and it snaps between those steps back to 0% pixelization. And what I meant about the this mouse leave here, if I comment this out, you'll kind of see. So I hover in, it's pixelating, but even when I hover out, that animation's still playing, which isn't terrible, but we may want it to just, as soon as we hover out, we may want it to stop animating. So that's what this is doing, just instantly setting it to clear as soon as we hover out. So if we save and refresh, that's looking good. There's a lot we can do with this. So I'm gonna clean this up, put it all in one line. This could also be done with like scroll trigger. So we have our timeline already here set to paused. We could potentially comment that out. I'll just copy all this for a second. Let's make this into a scroll trigger timeline. And let's make our trigger element be this link. And we'll say have our animation start when the top of that link is at top of screen and end when the bottom of that item is at top of screen, and set scrub to true. So when we do that, it should scrub through this entire timeline where it's updating the pixelization, and then we don't really need these hover in, hover outs. Let's just see what that looks like. I'm just curious. Refresh, and doesn't look like that's quite working. Let me see. So we commented out those, we took the pause out, we set up scroll trigger. Let's make sure scroll trigger set, markers true. Scroll trigger markers aren't even showing up. So that should be for each of these. We are looping through this item. Scroll trigger, top, bottom, top, scrub true. All that's right. Strange. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what's going on there, but I do think it would be cool to try and set that up. So the point is this could be tied to click, scroll, anything like that. I wonder if it just stopped refreshing. Let's do a hard refresh on this. Yeah, I'm not quite sure why those markers aren't showing. Had to troubleshoot that some other time. But anyways, I think it's a pretty cool setup. I'll definitely drop the hover state version. Oh, did you import scroll trigger? Thank you so much. I was like, why is this not working? The silliest thing sometimes. Okay. Yeah. All right. Cool. Good call. Yeah, let's try that and see, because this could be cool to test. It's too late at night. It's 1 a.m. here, so my brain's kind of shut down at this point. Okay, that's publishing. Let's set this back up. Scroll trigger. The trigger will be this item we're looping through. Start when top of item is at top of screen, and when bottom of item's at top of screen, scrub true. On update, we'll keep and throw markers back in there, because why not? And oops. Cool. Wait for that to publish. Should be published, maybe. One way to find out. All right, we got our markers, and yes. Okay. I would probably Yeah, that's definitely working, but the image is going out of view before you can see it ever become clear, so I'd probably need to adjust those points. Oh, and I didn't take these out. Yeah, I would probably do something like start when bottom of element is at bottom of screen, or even top is at bottom, and then when bottom is at bottom. So when it's fully in view, let's see. So, okay, yeah, there we go. So while this image is coming in, it's getting progressively more clear. And then as soon as it's fully in view, it's completely clear. So that'd be a cool one. And then toggle actions is the other version where it just instantly, instead of scrubbing the pixelization, it would instantly switch at a set duration. Um, cool. Well, yeah, I think this is gonna wrap it. So I'll go ahead and drop a clonable after this. Thanks so much everyone for joining the stream, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day or afternoon.